Tonight, we're going to talk about what's going right in the state of Oregon and what's going wrong. We'll take a look through the eyes of our state auditors. They're an example, I think, of what's going right. And they're really good at pointing out what's going wrong. And that makes it our big story tonight. Who wants to talk about audits? Now, I know when I say that, you just want to jump up off your couch or out of your chair, or maybe not. But I think it's really cool, and I think it's really interesting and exciting. So we are going to dive in. I think auditors are the superheroes of state government. They monitor how the massive government machinery is working, and they ask uncomfortable questions to make sure that taxpayer money is being used the way it's supposed to be used. With that in mind, let's take a look at a recent release by the Secretary of State's auditors, who put out a massive report on a variety of programs that they audited in 2023. They call it Keeping Oregon Accountable. A big part of this was monitoring the billions of dollars in extra tax money that the state got as a result of the pandemic. They identified, the auditors that is, $2.9 billion in accounting errors, which they pointed out were unintentional mistakes. They proposed ways to fix those mistakes, by the way. They combed through the books of 18 federal programs and 11 state agencies and issued 31 findings and recommendations. They also found big problems with internal controls, which are the mechanisms, rules, procedures, the stuff used to make sure the money goes where it's supposed to, in the following programs: Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, the block grants for community mental health services, block grants for prevention and treatment of substance abuse, the Medicaid cluster, and temporary assistance for needy families, or Tanif. All right, so we're going to dig into a few of those with the help of a top state auditor named Michelle Seifris.
We audit a lot of programs as mandated by the federal government. We find a lot of things and we report them as required. We find some common issues amongst various agencies and programs, one of those being subrecipient monitoring. So the distribution of funds to other entities such as cities and counties and community action agencies, nonprofits, things like that.
Okay, so Michelle throwing some technical lingo up right off the top there. Subrecipient monitoring. How's that? That's an important term. Just to make sure that you have that down, that's when the agency gets money and then passes it along to another agency to go do some important work. That first agency, though, is supposed to keep track of what's happening to the money, but that does not always happen. An example of that was found at the Oregon Department of Emergency Management. Federal rules say the agency is supposed to evaluate the risk that groups they're giving the money to will follow federal laws and the terms of the program for which they're getting the money. Sounds simple enough, eh? This comes into play, though, when there's a presidential disaster declaration, for example.
As a part of receiving federal money, if you're distributing it to subrecipients, you have to have a risk assessment process in place. So there's some questions you ask of the entity that you're sending money to basically see how they will handle the money so that you know how to monitor them. Do they get federal grants a lot? Do they know how to do it? Or is this their first time getting a federal grant and you may have to keep a closer eye on them to make sure they're spending the money you're giving them appropriately?
Now, the auditor's report in 2020 found OEM had no systemic policies or procedures in place to evaluate that. So in 2023, they circled back and picked a random sample of 36 groups getting money from the agency. They found that 4 had not even bothered to return a questionnaire about their practices, and one of the 4 was not even listed as a group getting money on the spreadsheet that tracked those groups. The auditors told the agency, fix that problem, will you? They also noted that there has been a lot of turnover and change there as OEM became its own agency out from under the Oregon Military Department last year. Here's another big problem auditors found with the Tanif program. It's a temporary program that gives cash to families with children who are low income. The auditors found problems with this program stretching back 14 years. Federal regulations require the state to collect information monthly and file it quarterly with the feds on people getting the money under the Tanif program. A second program requiring the state to spend at least a certain amount for needy families also requires quarterly reports to the feds. Well, the federal government told the state that data sent to them was just wrong, and the department could not provide the correct data to the state auditors when they asked for it. Because of that, state auditors could not test to see if the programs were working correctly. That included things like making sure that less than 20% of the clients were enrolled in the program for more than 5 years. Also, special tests relating to client penalties for refusal to work, special tests for failure to comply with work verification plans, and tests relating to a lack of child care for single parents of children under 6 years old. So it was a bunch of stuff. Our expert says it is a problem that has been going on for a long time.
Department of Human Services has been administering the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program for many, many, many years. They had a prior system where we found many years ago the data wasn't being reported correctly in these quarterly reports they're required to file. So they have to report on number of cases, type of cases, a variety of different data elements that are required in their reports. And we found at that time that it wasn't including all of the information. It was incomplete or wrong when it was coming out of the system into these reports. Then they transitioned to a new system 3 years ago. Things got worse for a little bit. They are improving, but we're still finding challenges with those reports being incorrectly pulled out of the system. The data is not coming out of the system and getting put into those reports as they should be for reporting those data elements they need to be.
She said everyone is working hard to fix the problem, but it's still not fixed. Another example is the Department of Early Learning and Care, which is a new standalone state agency. The agency gets federal money to help children in Oregon thrive in early childhood and beyond. Auditors report that the agency could charge either a higher rate or a lower rate to the feds, depending on the services they were providing. The auditors found the agency only charged the higher rate and overbilled the feds by $400,000. They told the agency, pay that money back and check to see if something similar had happened in earlier years. Management said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So that's a reason I think auditors are superheroes. There's just no way that you or I would ever figure out what was happening inside that or other agencies. But every year, dozens of smart people with sharp pencils go through the books and hold these agencies accountable. I think it's great. It's an ongoing solution for Oregon, something I think we should all feel good about. Here's just a few other examples I found in the report. The Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, the agency is required to send 20% of the tax it collects to cities and 56% to the general fund within 35 days of the end of each month. Well, the auditors found the agency using 2 different accounting systems, which resulted in sending too much money. That was the first problem. They also found the agency sent the money on time 2 times during the entire year. So that's another problem. And while we're talking about them, the state controls all 283 liquor stores in Oregon. Did you know there was that many? Each one is supposed to be audited each and every year. The auditors found that 22 not audited at all. And here's another you may have heard about. The disastrous rollout of the new payroll system called Workday. In April of last year, we talked with state employees who were furious they were not getting paid correctly. Auditors report that with the first paychecks issued on January 3rd of 2023, there were problems. Of the state's roughly 45,000 employees, there were a total of $3.5 million in overpayments. In January, 4,500 people were either paid too little or too much. In February, 2,767 employees were not paid correctly, and then in March, 2,151 employees got paid the wrong amount. Auditors found the rollout of the new system was either not sufficiently scoped or not properly conducted. And when they asked for a list of problems when they were identified, saying, hey, show us the problems, show us when they were identified, show us when they were solved, they were told there's not a list that exists like that.
It is very interesting. It's not uncommon for us to ask for things like that when looking at IT systems, just to see what issues there are, how they're resolved, and not having that kind of tracking was a challenge for us to audit around as well.
Yeah, interesting. So there you have it, just some of the work of the Oregon auditors over this past year. I think it's impressive. I may not be such a fan if I was a manager of the program, getting scrutinized them, I guess, but as a taxpayer, I am. I'm thrilled they're there. Keep up the good work, my friends. Oregon needs you. Now, it's your turn. What do you think about all these findings? Par for the course? Auditors being too strict, too tough? Or are you happy they're there? You know the drill. You can call or write to share your thoughts. The email address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you.